Hello, I'm Saima, a Doula UK doula, and I do birth and postnatal work. And this is the Doula UK presentation for Let's Talk Birth Virtual Conference 2020. In keeping with the theme of community and supporting each other, I am joined today by a group of Doula UK doulas who all volunteer with their local MVP, otherwise known as Maternity Voices Partnership, and Lisa Ramsey. Lisa, would you be able to tell us a bit about the purpose of the Maternity Voices Partnership and why do we have them?
Yeah, love to. Hi, Saima. Hi, everybody. So a Maternity Voice Partnership is a team of people who use maternity services, working along with people who provide maternity services, so midwives, obstetricians, and ideally maternity commissioners. And they work together to co-review and co-produce local maternity services. MVPs should be reaching out to all women in the local community to make sure that their voices are heard, that they're able to give feedback on their maternity experiences. And many MVPs now are looking at developing some sort of neonatal voices arm to their group, so that parents who've had a baby using neonatal services can also give feedback. And also be involved in shaping local services. Lots of MVPs are asking women and families, you know, what was really good about your experience using maternity services? Was there anything that wasn't quite so good? And what ideas have you got for improvement? And many of the things that they're hearing from women and families are either free or cheap to implement. It's often the little things that make a real difference to people when they're having a baby.
Amazing. And do you know how long MVPs have been around for?
Well, MVPs are built on the history of maternity service liaison committees, which were part of the review of maternity services back in 2015, which culminated in the report Better Births, which we're coming to the end of, maternity transformation programme, making maternity services more safe and personalised and family friendly for people using them. And maternity voice partnerships have been a really key aspect of that, making sure that the changes and improvements to maternity services at local, regional and national level are absolutely built around women and families using them, that their voice and their experience is absolutely at the heart of everything that we're doing.
And is this a UK-wide service? It should, you know, can people access this across the NHS?
So maternity voice partnerships are a key part of the NHS framework across England. They feed into the 44 local maternity systems that we have across England, providing maternity care to women and their families. And as far as I know, there are other similar still MSLCs in the other nations, but MVPs across England is absolutely the way that we are building into NHS maternity services, a key way for everybody to give feedback on their experiences, particularly those who we need to hear from at the moment. So Black, Asian, minority ethnic women and women living in areas of high deprivation, they're our key people at the moment to make sure that we provide adequate, good support to during their maternity journeys.
And that's a huge area of focus, isn't it, at the moment with everything that's going on? So that's really, can see the incredible work that's being done. So thank you for explaining. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, just find your local one on the National Maternity Voices website and join up. Be great to have you on board.
Thank you. And Bev, can you tell us what is the value of having a doula on an MVP?
Yeah, so I think that the value of a doula on an MVP is really that we have quite a unique perspective, in that we witness quite a lot of the maternity services and births and you know how these things are playing out for the families, but actually we're able to step back because we're not part of that experience. We're not someone that is experiencing that service like as a family, but we're also not someone that's working within the service either. And so we can really have that unique perspective in that we can step back and actually see what is working for families and what isn't. I think that it's a really important perspective to be able to kind of give that isn't emotionally driven or isn't driven by a personal experience, by just something that we witness day to day in our jobs.
Yeah, it's really important. And can you sort of see the difference that's being made in your partnership?
Yeah, I can. It's been really interesting actually seeing how the different ways that we sort of implement change within the maternity services, and the ways in which people give feedback and get involved with the MVP. I thought when I first joined MVPs that it was just going to be kind of sitting around in boring meetings, but actually it's a lot more than that. There's a lot of work that goes on outside of those meetings, and a lot of different ways that we can get involved with our MVP to help form that change. So yeah, it's been really interesting, and it is really, can really see the changes even within my local MVP and my local trust, which is really encouraging.
Absolutely, that's awesome. And do you find, you know, working with your clients as well, do you encourage them to kind of feedback, or do you sort of share things on their behalf? How does that work with being a doula?
You can kind of do it always, I suppose. You know, I can give feedback as a doula if it's something that I've personally witnessed or experienced with a client, but equally I feel it's actually really important for the families themselves to give feedback. I think there's something really valuable in having all of those voices collectively speaking up and saying, you know, this didn't work for me, or this did, we want to see more of this, less of that. So actually I think that as a doula it's also really important for us to encourage our clients and the wider community really to give their feedback. I think that sometimes, or a lot of the time actually, certainly when I speak to people, they feel like maybe it's complaining, or, you know, but actually getting them to understand that it's not about that. You know, MVPs are run around service user voices and they want to hear those voices, and so encouraging them just to sort of say, no, actually, you know, I want to tell my story and kind of what worked for me and what didn't. So yeah, I mean, you know, you can give feedback on behalf of a client, but I think it's always really important just to try and get the wider community involved, because the more people's voices speak up, the you know, the more we're heard and the greater change we can make, really.
Definitely, yeah, it's so important to be sharing and communicating what's been happening for each individual. Yeah, that's really amazing. I think I've had a situation as well with one of my clients where I knew, you know, the doula on their MVP, and I sort of put them together, and it meant that my client could communicate her story and her situation and felt really listened to and held in that space, and that was really beneficial for her. So
yeah,
it's really
yeah, I think what's really important actually is having having that being that go-between sometimes, you know, because families may not want to feedback to their trust directly, and so being able to feedback through another MVP member, like you said, like having a doula on the MVP, is actually really important, because they can still get their voice heard, but without without kind of feeling that they are confronting, you know, the NHS, as it were. I think it's quite nice to be able to be that bridge.
Absolutely, great work. Thank you, Bev.
Thank you.
Lina, could you tell us how can doulas represent voices that are underheard or seen?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm in East London, which is really a melting pot of culture. And I've also been in a different MVP in Southwest London as well before. And I think, yeah, it's really important to be creative and to find ways to reach the voices that are underrepresented and aren't heard, which can be a challenge. But I think doulas, you know, we have a unique role because we are people that tend to stand in the gap. I think doulas quite often are the glue that hold maternity teams and hold the whole kind of perinatal experience. We are connectors, we are networkers, we have resources, we have information. And I think as being on an MVP is really a good chance for doulas to represent the real role of a doula, because sometimes I think we can get misrepresented and there's assumptions that doulas are trouble, or, you know, we're like, whatever. There's so many assumptions, but actually I found in the East London one that this MVP is incredible. Like, the diversity and representation in the leadership, the community workers that, you know the area, born and bred in East London themselves, you know, it's been really effective. So when I work with someone, for example, English as a second language, and they report back to me that something has happened which has made them uncomfortable, you know, it's quite hard to go on a forum with 5 heads of midwifery, the head of Bart's Health, and 30 people looking at you on a Zoom call. But, you know, there are ways to go around it. So I like Bev said, you know, hooking that person up with a translator if needed, with the local community representative that actually also co-hosts sometimes the MVP, co-chairs it. So I found it very effective because it means that those people get some kind of healing as well, and some kind of they get to say what wasn't happened, and it really is powerful because, you know, there's so much in us, in all of us, and I'm a speaker as a white person, you know, I have racism in me, I have assumptions that I make, and even trying to unlearn those is, you know, it's quite hard work. And it's good to hear back from the people, you know, but say things like, I was told that I didn't look like I was in pain. I told, like, you know, maybe the notes even get misread sometimes. So it's important for the maternity care providers to hear back from the source of when things go well and when things don't go well. In the same way, you know, I fed back that once I was going into labor with someone, she was in labor, not me, and she was an Urdu speaker. And when we turned up, the hospital said, would you like an Urdu speaking midwife? We have one on shift. And the woman said, yes, please. And it was really beautiful because I can speak Urdu, the midwife was speaking Urdu, we were all speaking her language. She was the center of the experience. And it was really great that they went an extra mile, but you could see the benefit to her birth experience. So yeah, being able to feed back and just be able to feed back from the MVP to the larger doula community so that more people can get involved.
That's so lovely, sort of hearing, you know, those stories and how it really works. And like you say, that there's this melting pot in East London and everyone's coming together, and there's a broad diversity in the team, and that's you know, huge. I don't know if you know how, if MVPs sort of reach out like for those voices, do they go into the community, do they have sort of leaflets that how would people with those voices that might not be heard hear about the service?
That's a challenge they are overcoming now. They're very much in the community, but because of COVID, all the family centers and all the places they would normally be aren't open. So now they're trying different ways. So they're using Instagram, social media, Twitter to regularly post up the meetings, the links. They're asking people to invite local groups, Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups, you know, really get the word out. They're very much encouraged to hear back from the people themselves and arrange meetings and arrange feedback for them. And what was I going to say? Something. Well, it's gone now.
No worries.
But yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I know. They're putting plans in place. So a lot of brainstorming going on from the top levels right down to the ground and the community. So the latest thing I heard, which really excited me, was a 10-language kind of phone app where people are going to be involved in their care, be able to look at their own language, look at information and create a care pathway in their own language. So it means that, you know, they're going to have so much more option and really choice in their care, and hopefully a better birth experience because of that.
That's really exciting. And I think I've seen through lockdown, and I don't know if it was before this, that the East London Maternity Voices has sort of this Facebook page and an online element of sort of meeting. Is that something that has been going on before lockdown, or is that just sort of a new development? And have you found that that's been different to the in-person meetings?
I think ask Arlene or Naomi that question, because Arlene has a history of being in the system for on and off for years, and Naomi's been in it recently for at least a year, so they would be better to answer that one.
Great, I'll pick that up with them. And actually Arlene's next. So Arlene, I don't know if you want to respond to that. Do you have any thoughts on the changes?
Hi everyone. Yes, I used to be on the Maternity Liaison Committee before it was an MVP for Queen's in Romford and King George's in Ilford and Whipps Cross Hospital. And that Maternity Liaison Committee, I found, like what Bev was saying, it was a bit daunting. It was a way to understand all the different services that were around, but it didn't feel like we were moving anywhere, like nothing was progressing really. It was the same agenda which was going round and around, and it was quite a defensive forum really, because it felt like the consultants never attended, and it was only the midwives and maybe the NCT. I think myself and another friend were doulas on the Queen's one, so it was more the midwives sort of defending what had happened, and when we brought issues forward, because when I was on the Queen's one, we were walking the patch, a thing called walking the patch, and which is when you've got to have a DBS before you get that, to be able to walk along on the postnatal ward, check in with the women, how they found the service to be, have they had support with breastfeeding, how they're getting on, that sort of thing. And we would draw the curtain round and just check in with them so that they didn't feel like they were overheard by midwife or anything, and they could hopefully speak freely, because we also had a checklist that they could go through, but at that time it was myself and another colleague, and we didn't have another language to speak to them in, but it's so heartening to know now what Lina was saying, that the current MVP and the head of midwifery, she's really putting into place now this app so that people can access the MVP through 10 languages, which is great. And she's putting also a directory together to of all the different services around. So for instance, for Doula UK, for neighbourhood doulas, for Better Birth, those sort of things, Let's League, all of those services, so that people can access them. They can choose whether they want to access them, a paying service or not, or they can get it free. So they have a bigger pool to check out whether it suits them and it works in for them. I've only recently rejoined the MVP with Lina, and we feel like the past few weeks we've just been on meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. And so that was really encouraging to hear from Dr. Rowland, that she's really brainstorming and trying to find ways to outreach more to the AME community, but also the wider community, so that everyone, especially under COVID, feels supported. We know things are still broken. It feels like we've gone backwards in some ways with the COVID-19 situation, but hopefully with the MVP and hopefully going forward, we can provide that glue to bring those communities together, so that they, and point people in the direction where they can get the information that they need to feel supported. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, how have you found, doing the meetings by Zoom? Has that changed the
It's been a bit challenging. I've had to get my head around Zoom over the past, 3 months. So that's okay, but getting in on meetings, one meeting after the next, that's been challenging, because it's actually quite exhausting. I don't like to be sat at a computer or a laptop for hours, and it feels like I'm at one meeting after the next. And you've got to remember that all the MVPs are doing this voluntarily, so we're not being paid. So we're doing quite a few hours, 3-4 hours a week, if not more, on Zoom calls. and finding out what's going on in the trust and in local hospitals and the policies, and and that's all daunting because people are coming at you with their jargons and you're having to decipher what's going on, so that you can bring that forward to share with women, so that they know their rights and know that what they can challenge people on. It's not, so that's what's been challenging for me.
Yeah, it is a lot, and today we're doing this on Zoom, and last year I was at the conference, and it's completely different environment to be in, but it's so great in a way that we can continue to connect.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've already been on 2 Zoom calls today.
Excellent work. Very busy, Arlene. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, over the last time you were involved and how it's changed in this time. That's really good to reflect and see also how it's growing, and sort of brainstorming and coming up with all these new ideas, which
absolutely. And I think Zoom has made people be a bit more creative as well, and because we're not physically in presence of other people, we're having to work in a much more creative way and bring it all together. So I'm hoping that it will just keep moving forward from there.
Definitely. Thank you, Arlene. Going to go to Louise now, and I'm going to ask you, how do you feel that MVPs have filled the gap of information for families during COVID-19?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, I think, because when COVID kind of started, there was, I remember we had one of our formal meetings it was March 13th, I think we had a formal meeting, and quite a lot of the kind of higher up staff didn't come because they were all in rooms sorting things out. And from there, it just kind of kicked off in terms of families. I think what happened at that time was the maternity service was working out, what are we doing? What can we provide? How are we going to provide it? But what happened then to families is that they felt like that care had somehow been taken away, because really what happened was people were being told this appointment might not happen, or it might only happen by the phone, or we're changing our care pathways. And so what that meant was families were really feeling like they were like, whoa, suddenly left out of knowing quite what was happening at a time where everyone's anxiety suddenly went woof, So I think what was really important was that MVPs are already in a place where we have two-way dialogue with families. So we are already set up. What we already do is listening. So we were right there, not having to scrabble around, sort out what the care looked like, just to listen. And so therefore we were able to early on say, okay, this is what all the families are saying. This is how they are feeling from potentially appointments changing and things, and be able to feed that back quite quickly, I think, to the maternity service staff. Well, I felt like we were able to do that. There was certainly a little bit of a delay in terms of them working out what was happening for us to really feel like we were helping families. But I think because we were already there in a way that was set up, we always listen. We're always trying to get people's feedback actively. So we just suddenly got loads of feedback and were able to use it. And I think because the change was fast paced, we were able to meet, not completely, but somehow meet that fast pace changes. And so a lot of MVPs like ours have used the platforms we already had in place, so social media and things, to try and plug the gap of information. So where people felt like they weren't having as much contact with midwives or healthcare professionals, I think most MVPs have used their social media platforms to try and plug that gap in one way or another. So for us, we've had live Q&As with midwives and consultants, both on specifically COVID things, but also just, okay, well, you're seeing your midwives less, people are anxious, ask any question you like. So we've had, most MVPs have had lives with healthcare professionals. We've tried to plug the gap because obviously a lot of the antenatal provisions have kind of stopped. So a lot of MVPs have been doing antenatal lives and used doulas. I've used a couple of doulas for a couple of sessions on things that they are, well versed in being able to give people information on about birth partners, what to pack, just really simple things like that. But I think we've been able to really have a presence And I mean, certainly, I think most MVPs in the country will have found that their reach has gone up massively in terms of their social media, because we have been plugging a gap, and so people have found us. And the service have, you know, all of the midwives in Oxfordshire have been telling people, families, follow the MVP page, because that's where the updates are. So I think that's the other thing. A lot of I think the other thing is that we don't have so much bureaucracy. So when we put out comms and when we put out information, we have much more freedom. Obviously, it needs to be kind of right, but it doesn't have to go through so much rigmarole as stuff that comes from the NHS Trust. You know, comms from there has to go through layers of things, and then it might not be quite right. And so it can take time for that all to be sorted. Whereas we can just go, we're going live. Ta-da, we've done it. So that's, I think that's been really useful as well, to keep up with the pace of things, to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a resource that I found my clients are going to a lot more in over this time, just to get the updates, to communicate with other people. Like you say, they would have met other pregnant people in the antenatal sessions at the hospital potentially. So they're finding it a really useful resource. And also that there've been some antenatals going on online arranged by the MVP. And then also, I think I've seen sort of on the forums, when doulas can't get in touch, you know, doulas are separated from their clients and they need to speak to a midwife, it's really a great contact point to go through your MVP and have, you know, someone you can talk to, and then that gets fed back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know, it's really valuable for that point. And I think it is so useful because families are the, you know, we are always, well, obviously the way MVPs are based is that you have a certain percentage of your MVP are user representative and service users anyway. And so you are the people who are actually experiencing it. We really know and are in touch with what people are feeling. And so we are then able to advocate for that and say, look, this is how people are feeling. Because obviously healthcare professionals have had a lot on their plates to kind of sort out. And of course they know and they hear and they talk to families, but it's in a different way. And so having that really, like, you know, feet on the ground, really knowing like, no, this is really how people are feeling, is really helpful. And I hope that will help going forward. And we've certainly put out survey to get feedback from people about, to get a feel for when the service can be restored, so some of the restrictions be eased. Like, what are the most important things to families? Because the trust might think, oh, well, actually we can do this or we can do that, you know, but maybe what they think families really want, maybe it's something slightly different. Maybe one of the other things is more important to them, and maybe that's actually easier to do. So we're trying to find that kind of information out at the moment as well, to try and be proactive, so that as we kind of things move along, we can really say, well, that's great, but families are saying this would really mean a lot to them if this restriction could be eased, or, you know. So just really trying to make sure that the things that really matter to families are the things just here.
That's awesome. Really useful for the communities that are using the services. So thank you, Louise. And we're going to go to Naomi and ask, how would you advise that those watching this engage with their MVP?
Hi, yes. I mean, actually, I think talking about COVID-19, I think actually this whole pandemic has brought MVPs more to the forefront, because I feel before not many people had heard of MVPs. I mean, I've got 3 children and I'd never heard of an MVP, and I heard about it through my doula training, where our doula trainers on developing doulas encouraged us to find our local MVP and join it. And so I feel, you know, I always talk about the MVP to my clients. I try and talk about it a lot on social media to try and get the word out there, because it is such an effective platform for change. And but it is just a case of getting people to know about it. But I do feel that COVID-19 has provided an opportunity for more people to hear of it and engage more with healthcare professionals and doulas, and so in that way, you know, the MVP is becoming more well known. in terms of engaging with the MVP, obviously it is more difficult because we're not having in-person meetings and everything is on Zoom, and not everyone has access to Zoom and not everyone has access to social media. So it has, you know, I'm part of the East London MVP, like Lina and Arlene, and you know, it's been challenging to find ways to engage everybody in the MVP. But the other thing that I feel is really important is that it's building relationships between doulas and the healthcare professionals and the parents, and it really does feel like we're all in this together, and we all aim to create more positive experiences for families, and I think the MVP is so great at trying to facilitate that, and just as a doula as well, having access to the heads of midwifery is fantastic. I've had quite a lot of clients during the pandemic, and you know, a lot of things have gone right and a lot of things have gone wrong, but being able to directly contact the head of midwifery at the time a problem is occurring so that it can be sorted at that time, that's been a really positive thing. And I feel like moving forward, is going to really, I feel like this is the way that we can improve maternity services. This is the way to do it, for sure. But it is just getting the word out there about the MVP. And, you know, like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I think when we can start opening up family centres again, to have posters and leaflets, and if people can Google the National Maternity Voices and type, I think there's a thing where you can type in your postcode and it will bring up your local MVP. And I feel as doulas as well, we should be out there telling other doulas, new doulas, about the MVP, encouraging them to come on board, encouraging parents to come on board, and also midwives, because actually, surprisingly, I've come across quite a few midwives who don't know what an MVP is. So, you know, also talking to them about joining and having their voice heard.
Definitely, yeah. It's. I've been to a few different MVP meetings, and I really am amazed by how the community gets together and you start to recognise each other and build a relationship. And like Lina said earlier, you know, doulas can be misrepresented sometimes, and we can actually represent ourselves, and they can get to know us as people rather than an idea. Yeah, and that's really special.
That is, yeah. I mean, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the more we can build relationships, the better care families are going to get. So I think MVPs are a great thing, but it is just a case of getting more people to engage with it and getting the word out there. And things like this as well are going to help, because there's going to be lots of doulas watching this, and midwives, and, you know, maybe even obstetricians, and, you know, and the more we talk about it, the more the word gets out. So, yeah.
Well, keep talking about it and sharing within all of our communities, and hopefully everyone watching will as well. Thank you so much, Naomi, and everyone that's taken part today. Fred, that's all we have time for. Thank you for having us here. Let's Talk Birth on this platform, and thank you to you all for watching. Goodbye.